Good evening, SEC Nation, and welcome to the 31st edition of SEC Live, all right here on SEC at the Voice of College Football from yours truly, Jackson Johnson and Andrew Miller from Mississippi State at the Voice of College Football, and you see him bringing that beard magic Wednesday nights, all right here on the SEC channel. And let me tell you something, you're going to be in for a fun wild ride as we'll be going over who's the next Indiana in the SEC, the season recap of the 2025 season for the Mississippi State Bulldogs and what they need to do in order to have a better year in 2026 and much more. All right here. Tune in. How you doing tonight, good buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. I know there's nothing people want more than to hear about what a 5-8 football team is going to do moving into – who only went to a bowl game because of APR, by the way, because other teams chose not to go. People cannot wait to hear what's in store for Mississippi State. But no, we're going to try to have some off-season, 2025 recaps on the channel for a lot of the SEC teams and some look ahead of what's in store for the rest of the offseason for them. And we're starting off with the Bulldogs, which is why I'm here with Jackson on a Friday night to be the Mississippi State guy. So we'll talk about the Bulldogs, but obviously we have some other stuff for the show as well.
Oh, man, it's going to be a fun one, as a matter of fact, because – that was something I really thought about, though, was how Mississippi State started off the season, and it was a fantastic finish against Arizona State in week 2. It was incredible. Incredible, man. I got to tell you. Boom. What was your thoughts when watching that game? Did you think?
My thought was that never happens for us.
Wow.
Mississippi State has lost a lot of heartbreaking games across all sports forever. And I know a lot of fan bases always can say that. And everybody loves to play the games of who's the most miserable in college football or college athletics. That's just what fans of teams that are powers try to convince everyone that they're the most miserable. That's just the nature of sports fandom. But genuinely, Mississippi State has had a lot of the crushing defeats, but has not been on the receiving end of the improbable victories. Just State does not have those moments. You don't have the last-second shot going in basketball, the walk-off home runs. I guess the 2018 baseball team did have some of those moments, so I should take some of that back. But MSU football specifically, last-second wins for the Bulldogs is just not something that we've seen in football, specifically for football. And that game – it's so wild because it was the total tale of two halves, and that State came out on fire, scored on like the third or fourth play of the game. They end up defensively were playing dominant early in that first half. Offensively, left some points off the board, which almost came back to bite them, but they were still like they were up 17-0 in the game. And we're moving the football pretty effectively, and you felt like they could ultimately take control. And into the first half, they're going to get off the field and be done. You get a roughing the passer penalty on the final play of the first half that puts Arizona State into field goal range. They get an untimed down, get to kick a field goal to go. And that ended up being significant. They get that field goal to make it 17-3, and they got some momentum, and they built off it. State in the second half just kind of went stagnant offensively. Arizona State found a rhythm. They really just started getting under center run game and just kind of pounding it at Mississippi State. And State was not handling it well, especially State lost their best defensive lineman at the end of that first half. He had been causing a lot of havoc in that game. Will Whitson, he gets hurt at the end of the first half, ended up being hurt for the season, which was a big blow. But with him out of the game, State just couldn't stop the run, and Arizona State finds their way to get back into it. And it just felt like, oh no, right? This is going to be it for they're going to blow this. And what was a crazy atmosphere in Starkville, by the way. Like it wasn't a fully packed house, but the student section was packed. The cowbells were going insane. Fans were not ringing responsibly. I know everyone that's not a Mississippi State fan loves to hate on cowbells and how annoying it is. And it's unfair, so on and so forth. And the rule is supposed to be that when the center gets over the ball, we stop ringing. That wasn't happening on that night. Although I think technically speaking, it's really an SEC rule. So in a non-conference game, who cares? For the rest of the conference, you should be happy that we beat the Big 12 team and we're using our cowbells to the advantage. But the cowbells were rattling Sam Leavitt throughout the night, and it was a crazy fun atmosphere. And it's just like This is a chance for Jeff Lebby to get some much-needed momentum for this program, get the fan base behind him, and you're letting it slip away. And Arizona State gets a big run to set up a first and goal with like 2 minutes left to go in the game. And there was a lot of natural reaction of like, you just need to let him score. Because if you don't let him score here, they're just going to kill more clock and you're not going to have any time to operate. You just need to let him get in the end zone, and then you got an opportunity to try to the game was tied at 17 at that point. So it was like, let him score a touchdown. You'll be down 7, got an opportunity to get the ball back and go and try to tie it up. State ends up saying, we're going to play defense here. And they made us multiple stops from like the 1 yard line, force a field goal. And obviously we remember the touchdown that happens on State's ensuing possession. And the crazy thing about that play is how even that play is improbable, because if you go watch, Arizona State sent like all out pressure, which is, it's crazy that they did that considering State's receivers. They had a blitzer who was going to run free to Blake Shapen. That blitzer trips. If he does not trip, it's a sack and the game is over. Shapen would have, because he had to wait for Brennan Thompson to get open. But he hits Thompson. Because the guy trips, he's able to get the touchdown, and State scores. And again, one of the craziest touchdowns ever. They get an interception, like the Arizona State's first play on offense, and they win the game, storm the field, which, again, people are lame and had to ask, why did State storm the field against Arizona State? I don't think some of y'all understand what MSU football has been like recently. Winning that game, it was an emotional release is what that field storming was in that moment. It was a lot of fun, and it felt like it was a chance to build a ton of momentum. And look, it did. They went to 4-0. They obviously beat Alcorn. They handled NIU, kind of a sloppy game, but won that game and set up a big matchup with Tennessee where, you know, even though unfortunately the visiting side of the stadium got taken over, but that's an issue for another day. You had another great atmosphere in Starkville and had an opportunity there. You fell short, though, in overtime. And unfortunately, that kind of became a sign of things to come for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and you know, just kind of like looking at the non-con slate, you start out 4-0, right?
Yes, undefeated to open up the year.
Yep, and
then
you end the year 1-8 the rest of the way. Yep, only one win against Arkansas, but close but no cigar against Tennessee. Close but no cigar against Florida and Texas. What's going on there?
Well, so the Tennessee game, so I guess to break all these down, because like State was so close to having a much bigger season. The Tennessee game, the way I've described that one, Mississippi State could have won the game, but they just made too many mistakes in the end. And Tennessee made a lot of mistakes in that game too. Like Tennessee's definitely looking at that game saying if they play clean, we could have just won easily. Mississippi State's looking at that game saying if we play clean, we walk out with a big upset win and we're 5-0, and who knows what the season could have been at that point. But State was not a good enough team to be able to afford making mistakes and winning a football game, and ultimately it just wasn't enough against Tennessee. And they had some rough plays, just go hurt them in that game. But you lose a heartbreaker, you still felt like you were in a good spot. You go to A&M and get blasted, but it kind of is what it is. At Florida off the bye, when it had been reported throughout the week, hey, Napier's done after this game, win or lose, a dejected Florida team, and State had an opportunity to go in Gainesville and really bury them. And they just, again, wasted a ton of opportunities in that first half. Had multiple wide open touchdowns that Blake Shapen just didn't hit. Florida finally got some offensive momentum and kind of took control of the game for a bit, but State defensively gave them credit in the second half, made plays to give State a chance. And obviously State goes down the field. They are in field goal range, down 2. If they simply hand the football off, you can at least attempt a field goal for the win, and you're walking out of there. It was an ugly game, but you got the win. They decide to stay aggressive and throw the ball, and it was a great defensive call from Florida. I won't break it down here, but Blake Shapen got totally baited into a losing interception. It was baffling that you were still choosing to throw the football in that moment when you could have just run the ball. That game was crushing. And then you come back home against Texas, and no one's hyped up. No one's excited because of after what just happened. But then against Texas, they play their best game of the season through the first 3.5 quarters. They got off to kind of a slow start, but they played really, really well. And Blake Shapen was playing really well. He was completely locked in. Defensively, they were giving Arch Manning and the Longhorns all sorts of problems, and they built out a 17-point lead. There was a point in the fourth quarter, Texas scored a touchdown early, and then State immediately on like the first offensive play of the next drive gets like an improbable like shovel pass, go for a 60-plus yard touchdown. And when that play happened, it was the 100% a case of like, all right, it's just their night. It like State's going to make this happen. Then they didn't. You know, Texas made some adjustments. Offensively, they started basically Texas took a lot of shots throughout that game and just were not connecting on them early. They started connecting on them, but they continued to play aggressive, and playing aggressive defensively got them burnt. And then on the other side of the ball, Texas just started sending pressure. Texas had kind of sat back throughout that game, played pretty conservatively. They finally realized if we can't just sit back, we got to try to speed up Blake Shape and make something happen, and they started getting a ton of pressure. And really were able to get them and cause some problems. And State blew a 17-point lead at home, and it was people were very ticked off, including myself.
Oh, man. Yeah, it also, you're just kind of like looking at everything. What can be done for Mississippi State in order to have a better season for 2026?
Well, you know, and just I guess to close out for 2025, and I know I went long breaking down all those games. My apologies for that.
All good, all good. Yeah, I just found out about some news that's affected one team, which we will go over that after we get done talking about Mississippi State.
Great, we'd love to have more news on the show. No, look, to give them credit, they went to Arkansas and rebounded. Now Arkansas was terrible, and Arkansas committed 1 million penalties in that game and kind of handed the game to State, but they found a way to go get an SEC win for the first time in, it was like over 2 years at that point, since the last time they went to Fayetteville and won back in 2023. So you at least got that monkey off your back. But then they ended the season with 3 straight blowout losses. And I know, look, Missouri, Georgia, Ole Miss, obviously much better football teams than Mississippi State, but the effort in those games were really frustrating. You close and look, you get gifted a bowl game and a chance to make a statement, get some momentum in the offseason, even with the APR, and just didn't put forth an effort anybody wanted to see in that game. So it was a frustrating year for State because if you look at it big picture, like you went from 2-10 to 5-8. You went from losing to G5 teams to handling business against the G5. So, hey, Arizona State was a solid football team and you beat them at home. Arkansas was not a good football team, but at least you beat an SEC team. And you were competitive, like I said, in those 3 losses that were so painful. You at least went head-to-head with those teams. You clearly were much, much better. The frustrating side of it is you could have won a couple more games easily. And frankly, because of the way you lost the games, it wasn't like you just took a loss. You lost games where it's like you made your mistakes got in the way. And some of Jeff Levy's coaching decisions got in the way. So it was a really frustrating year, even though State objectively took a big step forward. That puts a lot more pressure going into 2026 of like, now you need to see another step forward. This needs to be a winning season for Jeff Levy. And you need to start to see things on the field from a game management standpoint that make you feel confident the overall direction of the program is improving. And it's not as simple as, well, we'll just get better players on the field and we're going to be able to win more games. Yeah, State's roster was not great this past year. It was good enough to win more games than they did. And, you know, I think the roster is going to be better again for 2026 with some of the guys they brought in already. And I know we'll talk about the portal stuff here just in a sec, but they still – they need to improve a lot and take a big step forward. And look, for them getting better, the biggest thing is it is roster. It's getting the lines of scrimmage corrected. But Jeff Levy's going to do a better job from a game management standpoint. That's going to be a big thing for him. He's got to get that part of it figured out and understanding when he needs to be aggressive, when he needs to dial it back a little bit, and how he picks and choose some of his calls and not leave everything on the quarterback's plate of like, well, it's an RPO on this play, so he's got the option to do X, Y, and Z. You know, you don't have to give him that option. You can call a play that just takes that out of his hands because that was an excuse that got used multiple times for some bad plays throughout the season as well. It's an RPO. It's like, okay, you don't have to call an RPO. You know, you can just call, you know, whatever. And fixing the defense is a big part of it. Obviously, defensively, it's been a disaster the past 2 seasons. This past year, first half of the year, they were better and did take some steps forward. But down the stretch, it got really rough. And you make the change, you bring in a familiar face in Zach Arnett, who definitely left Mississippi State on poor terms with a lot of the fan base. because of the way things ended with him from a coaching standpoint and some of his decisions he made as a head coach. The guy was objectively a very good defensive coordinator. And it's a guy that you know can be successful in Starkville calling a defense, and a guy who has worked opposite of an offense. Lebby is not an air raid coach in the way that Mike Leach was, but in the idea of working opposite of an offensive mind who is all offense and plays an aggressive attacking style of offense. Like, he's got the familiarity dealing with that as well. So I think that's going to be a big thing for them, is improving that side of the ball and from a defensive play calling standpoint. But then it's the roster, and that's where so much of it is with the portal. But I'd be remiss. I haven't talked about the biggest reason for optimism for 2026 is Kamario Taylor. This is a kid that grew up a Bulldog. He is the nephew of former Mississippi State quarterback / receiver Omar Connor. Grew up right down the road in Macon, Mississippi, about 30 minutes south of Starkville. Always wanted to be a Mississippi State Bulldog. Became an incredible high school quarterback for Noxubee County, and stuck with it for Mississippi State. Mississippi State recruited him hard throughout. Jeff Lebby recruited him hard once he became the head coach of State. And he stuck with it. There was, push from Georgia, Texas A&M late in his recruitment to try to get him to flip to those schools. He wanted to be a Bulldog, and is the highest rated QB signee Mississippi State's ever had. I remember at the end of his recruiting cycle, On3 had him as a top 35 player nationally. So like a borderline 5-star player. And he is that type of a talent. 6'4", 230, has an absolute cannon. His athleticism and his running ability, both from a power standpoint and in terms of his elusiveness, in the way he glides across the field. Yes, Mississippi State fans saw Dak Prescott. When we've got a guy who's become one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Dak Prescott was not a high-level player coming out of high school. Like, Dak Prescott was a developmental story under Dan Mullen, who turned into a great quarterback for Mississippi State, obviously. I'm not at all saying Kamario Taylor is going to be Dak Prescott, but Kamario Taylor comes in with a talent ceiling Mississippi State's never seen, and he was able to get involved as a freshman throughout the year. Jeff Lebby had packages for getting him on the field, and ultimately, when it was all said and done in the Egg Bowl, Jeff Lebby made the decision that he was going to start Kamario Taylor. And Taylor kind of, showed you, even in a losing effort, why he is this guy State fans are so excited about with some of the plays he made, especially in the second half. Like, one of the craziest examples of escaping a sack and then turning it into a 40-yard touchdown run. He's special. And he showed some of that in the bowl game against Wake Forest. Suffered a scary injury late in that game that looked like an injury that could impact his 2026 season. Thankfully, we have found out that is not the case, and he will be good to go. He'll be good to go for spring. Underwent a minor surgery just to repair a few things, but had no breaks, no tears, and it's going to be good to go for spring. So you avoided disaster there. State's got a special talent at quarterback. He's still young. He still has development, and is still a bit raw. But, man, he does some things that you just don't see, or Mississippi State at least hasn't seen. And they've got that to build around, and it leads into this portal class, which, again, I'm sorry, I know I keep rolling here.
No, you're also good.
They've held on to a lot of their best players. That is the other big thing is Kelly Jones, who was going to be probably a day 2 pick at corner. Mel Kiper had him as a first-round cornerback if he came out this year. He's coming back, and they were able to hold on to him. Anthony Evans, their top leading receiver that was able to return, is back. Isaac Smith, at safety, who's an all-conference performer, is back. They brought Fluff Bothwell at running back. Every single player they had that was expected to start next year. They've lost maybe a couple of guys on the offensive line that could have competed for a starting job, but every single guy that they knew, he is a cornerstone part of this team that we want to have, we know is going to be a key piece for us in 2026. They held on to him, which you don't see that in college football these days, and it hasn't happened for Mississippi State. In the portal era, State has lost at least one starter every year to the portal. They did not this year. So the roster retention is there because they're bringing their key guys back. They've got an exciting young quarterback. If you hit on the guys you brought in the portal, you could take a nice step forward.
Yeah. Well, and your Rashada is suspected to be battling for the backup position.
We had to talk about Jaden Rashada, did we not? Like that's a name that just has to be mentioned. I'm sure that's going to be good for an SEO standpoint in having him out there. Yeah, Jaden Rashada. Apparently, Jeff Lebby was interested in him 2 years ago as a guy who either would have come in instead of Blake Shapen or competed with Blake Shapen when Lebby took over as State's head coach. You know, look, at the end, I know the guy at this point has kind of become a meme and is just sort of viewed as a universal bust, and that's probably fair. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you this kid's he's not coming to Mississippi State to start, right? Kamario Taylor is the quarterback. State had to get a backup, though. They signed A.J. Swan, who is another name SEC fans will remember from his time at Vanderbilt and then at LSU, as sort of a veteran guy who's, hey, this guy started games in the SEC and at his best was an okay quarterback. If you had to turn it over to him, you could. But the one thing with Swan is kind of limited from a talent standpoint. For all of Rashada's flaws, he does still have big-time arm talent. Not really a runner, but he has better escapability in the pocket than Swan does, which for State is a big deal, and having a guy that can avoid some pressure. So I think Lebby just views it as, hey, we got a chance to bring a guy that still has some talent into the quarterback room. And no, he's not going to be our guy, but he can battle for that QB2 role. And if something happens with Kamario or we had to bring in the backup, you have two veteran options that one with a good talent ceiling and then one that's, been there, done that as a starting quarterback in the SEC that you could turn it over to. So it was surprising. None of us were expecting it, but it makes sense when you kind of break it down.
True. I mean, that's true, man. Like, there's no doubt about it. Well, my apologies for taking a call during the show. That is something I usually do not do, but when I do, we've got some breaking news. Not one, but two bits of breaking news here on SEC at the Voice of College Football. As we know where Jordan Seaton from Colorado is going to be going to. He's going to the LSU Tigers for the 2026 season. And, just finding this out in real time, what do you think this does for LSU exactly, Andrew?
It's big for them. We talked about this on the Wednesday show that if LSU got Seaton, that was kind of going to be a final piece for them in terms of what they needed to add. They had to completely revamp the offense. Obviously, you get Sam Levitt and a quarterback. The receiving core that they've added, I think, is fantastic. Held on to the running backs that you had there. You had Trey'Dez Green coming back at tight end. So plenty of skill talent. You have a quarterback that has plenty of talent in Sam Levitt. Who's protecting these guys? Who do you have up front? And obviously, offensive line was such a big problem for LSU a season ago. Kind of completely overhauled that room. If you were a starter for the LSU offensive line a season ago, you're elsewhere. That may not be fully accurate. There may be one or two guys that are back. But by and large, the guys LSU was playing up front are now off to other programs. They had to go and get other guys to come in. And they've added some quality transfers in the offensive line, but you have not yet added someone that you could look at and say, that is a game-changing offensive lineman. Jordan Seaton is that. This is a first-round talent at offensive line. This kind of plays into the Mississippi State discussion because obviously Mississippi State was in there in the Jordan Seaton sweepstakes, so we can talk about that if we'd like to as well. But you're getting a guy who you feel confident, okay, he can protect the left side of the line. He is a highly rated pass protector, super athletic. I know there's the clip that's gone viral of him with Colorado as a puller where he is hauling butt as a pulling lineman and on a run play. I think run blocking is the area that it has been talked about. He's got to continue to develop that a little bit, but I think it's a huge, huge pickup for LSU. And I look at that offense as probably being complete. Like, they're still going to have to figure out the rest of the line and who's able to step in at this point. But I would feel confident they put together a competent offensive line with the skill talent they have. I've said it a million times. I'm not the biggest Sam Levitt believer, but I also recognize he is still a talented player. And within the Kiffin, Charlie Weiss offense, he's a fit for what they like to do. And again, those guys call in plays, but especially with the weapons that Levitt's going to have to throw to, they're going to be able to scheme wide open guys constantly. You just have to make sure you got the protection up front to give them time. Getting Jordan Seaton gives them that protection up front. So it's a huge get for LSU. This is a team now that, again, offensively, I think they're in a great spot. Defensively, with the talent they've added to that defensive line, obviously, Prince William Unmielen coming in at defensive end. They also have the other transfers. Blockton from Auburn is a good pickup on the defensive line. The transfer from Clemson. I think back seven of the defense probably still have a few things to figure out. Although Whit Weeks coming back at linebacker, so a very talented piece there in the middle of the defense. They're going to have a pass rush, and they're going to have a great offense. You put those two things together, you're probably going to be pretty successful and be able to win a lot of games. So Kiffin's got a team that should be able to compete right away in year one.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. We're definitely going to wait and see what happens. But, I mean, it's a huge get for LSU. I mean, as they needed this to happen, they needed to get an offensive tackle in the portal.
For sure. No, that was the last big thing for them to figure out. It is interesting because it felt like all the momentum from LSU had faded. And, it felt like in the past few days there was a lot of Oregon talk. Mm-hmm. That there was a lot of push for him to end up at Oregon. And I know, LSU fans, there was a lot of talk of like he was going to commit on that visit or did commit, but then I know that the rumor is his uncle didn't let him. I don't know if that actually happened or not, but I think LSU felt confident they had him, and that the past few days that mood had shifted for sure, that Oregon had very much come into the mix there. I think there was a lot of talk of a Nike deal in place that, hey, you go to Oregon, like we will have you set up as soon as you're a pro. You'll be assigned as a Nike athlete moving forward once you get drafted, it's a big selling point. And I think Oregon, with, again, some of the guys they've had on offensive line, Miami had come up a lot, right? Because Mario Cristobal, an outstanding developer of the offensive line. Alex Mirabal is an O-line coach. I said this, I think I said it on the Mississippi State show when we were talking about Seton. The fact that I can tell, like, I don't know many offensive line coaches, but the fact I know the name of Miami's offensive line coach tells you he's probably pretty good at his job. And Alex Mirabal is a fantastic developer of that position. So those other teams coming into the mix, it just felt like the momentum had faded from LSU, and not many people were expecting this to happen. So the Portal King strikes again, right? Kiffin finds a way to get it done in the end. And Jordan Seaton's going to be a Tiger. That's a big pickup for them. And, yeah, it would make me believe this LSU team, year one for Kiffin, can definitely click right away and be very successful.
Oh, agreed. Another win for the Portal King.
It's hard to beat.
Well, tonight it's just a story about offensive line, isn't it, good buddy? And on perfect timing, because there we go. Breaking news while live. Alabama and offensive line coach Chris Kaplowitz have parted ways. And Scarborough from Bama 247 was the first one to report this. And I got to say, I'm not too surprised that this has happened because the offensive line looked sloppy this season for the Crimson Tide. It looked disastrous. The hard part, well, that's going to be a question. Who does Alabama look for as their next offense coordinator? Well, Travion and I will break that down on the Alabama channel when I get done with the 31st edition of SEC Live. Just kind of going over it. I would like to see if Alabama can get Sam Pittman. I mean, those are my early thoughts on it. Like, that would be nice. I mean, it's like that's a guy that can bring a lot of energy where he just goes, turn that damn jukebox on.
I think Sam Pittman is happy sitting at home with his pack of cold beer and just relaxing. For what it's worth, I joke a little bit. There had been talk that regardless of how this season went, Pittman was probably going to step down from coaching and be done with it. That he was not going to look to go take a job elsewhere. That was part of the reason when he was fired, Arkansas, in their agreement for his buyout, a lot of these contracts have a duty to mitigate clause, as in when we fire you, like, yes, we'll pay you your buyout, but in order to get your buyout, you have to go look for another job, and you have to actively get another comparable job where you're making good money, which offsets from your buyout. Arkansas waived that on Pittman. They said, look, we're not going to give you – they made an agreement, like, we're not going to give you the full $20+ million he was owed, but we will not make you go get another job. As in, like, you can just be done, man. You can go have fun. He's old. You're right. He's a good O-line coach and I think a pretty good recruiter of offensive linemen as well. And the right type of mentality that Bama wants, but I don't know how realistic he would be. That said, and I know you have much more insight here. I totally get why Alabama's doing it. Like the offensive line being a big of a problem as it was for them, especially look, Caden Proctor, I know at this point we've talked about whichever team takes him in the first round is like that staff is getting fired, is where he's at. But the fact that you had Caden Proctor and Parker Brailsford up front, two guys who were supposed to be all conference caliber linemen, and they were not. And you were not successful in the offensive line. Your pass protection suffered throughout the year. You could not run the football effectively whatsoever. The fact that you had to make a change, it makes a ton of sense.
I was thinking, what if Alabama got Jeep Wade from Georgia Tech, the offensive line coach for Georgia Tech? Because I feel like that would be a pretty good candidate right there.
So I guess Georgia Tech, the O-line coach, did not follow Faulkner to Florida. He stayed at Georgia Tech.
I think he stayed at Georgia Tech, yeah.
So the only thing I would say is I do think, like, for Georgia Tech, and the same goes for Pittman, for that matter. I wonder if DeBoer wants someone who has familiarity with what they do offensively.
Oh, yeah.
Because of how much the passing game is a part of what they do. A lot of O-line coaches are all around the run game. And to be fair, Bama needs to improve the run game. So maybe you want to bring somebody in who's got that type of specialty. Because Georgia Tech, especially, like with what they do from a spread run game standpoint, and they did some pretty neat things last year. I think they pretty much there were certain linemen they just didn't run behind, and they would they had a lot of really cool run schemes, did a ton with the counterplay. They were a really fun offense to watch, and your O-line coach is a huge part of that. I will be curious because I do think that'd be a good hire. Georgia Tech's been very good up front these past few years. Do you try to make a hire with a guy that can step in and bring those new, fresh ideas and try to help bring that element to the Bama offense? Or if you're DeBoer, I don't know if he looks for somebody off his tree, but someone who knows or has been in a system similar to what you like to do and can coach linemen for that type of an offense.
Oh, here we go. Oh, never mind. Jeep Wade's at Nebraska. He's at Nebraska. Okay, like Scott Huff seems like a pretty good candidate. He's at Washington. So that's pretty good right there. And he's worked with DeBoer before, so that's pretty good.
I don't know how Washington's O-line performed this year. I can look.
Well, I'm
quickly.
looking at the 2025 season stats of sats allowed. And let's see where Washington is.
They gave up 34 sacks on the season.
Oh, geez.
About 2.6 a game. In terms of 35 quarterback hurries, which, to be fair, sacks are sometimes a quarterback stat. Damon Williams, very good player. I don't know how he is from a pass rush avoidance standpoint. In the run game, Washington averaged 4.6 a carry, which is solid. They didn't run it a ton. I mean, they 165 yards per game, but 4.6 a carry. Pretty good. It was a big improvement from the previous season for what it's worth. And I guess you could Jed Fish is kind of a pro spread offense, which is more similar to what you're doing with DeBoer. So maybe that would also fit in as well. But from a sacks allowed standpoint, that's not what you're looking for.
No, it's not. But I will say it's going to be interesting to see what happens for, the Crimson Tide. Oh, man.
Got to fix O-line. And I know you guys have brought in a lot of transfers. They've added options to the room. So you feel you can get better there, but definitely the coaching's going to be part of it. Hey, look, Mississippi State's in the same boat, man. That was the thing coming into the offseason is figuring out the O-line. They were hoping Jordan Seaton would happen, and I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this. I don't know why you guys would ever get your hopes up. We didn't get our hopes up, but State definitely went all in to try to make that happen. It was always going to be an uphill battle. We'll see what we turn now, but this was a theme throughout the SEC. I know I talked about it on this show. Half the teams in the league, O-line play was a major concern for them. And I think that's more of what we're seeing in college football moving forward. That's I think Shehan Jayaraja for CBS Sports did an article back either last year or was before the season talking about O-line development in the transfer portal era and how it's an epidemic across college football. That's a position where development matters a ton. It's not so much about, well, just recruit guys who are the 5 stars. Like, yeah, that's fine and well, but having raw athleticism and size is not enough to get by. There's a lot of technique. There's a lot of understanding how to work together as a unit. A lot of coaching that has to in development that has to go into the O-line room. And that's a group that you need to get old and stay old. You need veteran players out there who have played a lot of football together. And the portal has made it tough to do that because offensive linemen, view it in the same way that every other position does, which is, well, if I'm not set to play, I'll take my redshirt year as a freshman, but if I'm not set to be a starter as a sophomore, I'm going elsewhere. And it's like, well, a lot of first and second year players don't start on the offensive line unless it's out of absolute necessity. Like you try to start guys who have been in your program multiple years at that spot. So you've really hurt your development from it. And it's tough to portal in offensive line because bringing in a group of guys who have not played together up front when that's a unit where cohesion is such a big deal is difficult. So O-line play has become an epidemic across college football. We've seen it at Bama, LSU, Texas this past year, Mississippi State, South Carolina. Even some of the teams that were supposed to have good offensive lines, Auburn didn't have much success. Florida was not as good as they needed to be. O-line play has been a problem across the league. We'll see who can figure that out.
Agreed. All righty, so we've got the real reason why you're here for tonight, so that we can
But
go.
they weren't here to hear about Mississippi State.
Well, yeah,
I kid. Yeah.
But yeah, it's because like somebody in the chat, Iron KY says Kentucky makes it to the Final Four of the CFP by 2030. Calling it now. It's a bold prediction, my friend. We thank y'all for tuning in to tonight's edition of SEC Live, all right here, and just kind of like going over it, and just seeing like what Will Stein is going to be creating in Kentucky football. Just kind of like looking at everybody. Who is like the most likely to be the next Indiana for the SEC? Because you talked about how Mississippi State could be the next Indiana for the SEC, but who's the most likely to be the next Indiana for the SEC?
Well, how are we quantifying Indiana? Are we saying just who's the next program that nobody's like a traditional bottom tier program breaking through and having? Look, okay, I think we should also clarify. Expecting a team
somebody
like
that had a losing season in the previous year, but could just surprise everybody out of the blue.
By that standard, I do think Kentucky's fair, and I don't have their schedule up if you would like to pull that, but we talked about their transfer class a few times now. I really like what Will Stein has done with the guys that they have brought in to this roster. Obviously, Kenny Minchie at quarterback is a guy that was challenging CJ Carr for that starting job in South Bend going into the season. And CJ Carr ended up being one of the better quarterbacks in the country. And it was into, I believe, the fall that it was a question of whether or not Carr was 100% going to be the guy. So that does speak pretty well of Minchie and his talent ceiling. Getting that done, that's a big deal. CJ Baxter is a capable player at running back. Javonte Barnes, I know up and down career at Oklahoma, but I think if you get a better line in front of him, like that's a capable back. I also think, Will Stein, I know Will Stein's not calling the plays, but I imagine it'll be his offense. If you look at the receivers, Nick Anderson is still a guy that I think could be a very good player. Probably need to add a couple more guys there to feel, well, probably need to see a few more guys emerge because they're not going to add more bodies at this point. But the O-line thing's what stands out. Like getting Lance Hurd, getting Colton Price, Tegris Espola, like they've done a really good job of loading up on that offensive side of the ball. And look, defensively, you see some transfers up front that you can feel excited about. Antonio O'Berry is someone that I talked about coming from Gardner-Webb that incredibly productive at a lower level, and I think that always stands out in terms of stepping forward. I like some of the guys they added on the back end of the defense, Jordan Castell, Aaron Gates. So I think you've got some really intriguing pieces stepping in, and I think offensively especially, they can be pretty successful right away. And again, we can talk about the schedule here because I'll be honest, I can't really see that all that well from our
Oh, here
screens.
we go. Yeah, let me go ahead and
that's better. That's a tough start to the season. I'll say that. That is a very tough start to the year. Of course, I'm talking about Youngstown State. That's what I mean there.
Yeah, so Alabama, no. No.
At Oklahoma, I mean, I'm high on the Sooners. I think they could be good. We talked about LSU earlier. I think LSU is going to be really good. That is interesting where that game might fall for LSU, though. I don't know what they have around that. What is Vanderbilt as a regression team? South Carolina. I mean, interesting to see what the Gamecocks could be this year. At Tennessee, I don't fully know what to think. Florida, Missouri, Louisville, though. I mean, I think Kentucky could be a bowl team in year one. That would not at all shock me.
Yeah.
It's not an easy slate. That's the big thing working against them here, which Indiana, and I'm not trying to do the whole thing, SEC fan dogs on the opposing conference's schedule, but there's Indiana in year one. Not this past year. This past year, their schedule wasn't super difficult, but they at least got tested a couple times prior to the playoff. Indiana in 2024, the schedule was cheeks. It was total cheeks, and they got to beat up on it, and it helped them out. They were a good football team. They were not an 11-win quality football team in year one. But it obviously gave them a lot of momentum going to this year. No one's going to deny Indiana was freaking awesome this year. You'd be an idiot to try to claim that. They got momentum off of that, though. I don't know, Will Stein, Kentucky, you don't think they were going to be able to get that same momentum in year one, but do I think they could find a way to get to a bowl game? Yes. I mean, is there anybody else in the SEC that you would look at as a possibility?
I mean, maybe Mississippi State.
I wasn't trying to get you to say State for what it's worth. But I'll say this for the Bulldogs, and because I didn't get my full thoughts towards the end because we had to hit that breaking news. I do think State has hit at a lot of key spots kind of under the radar. I think there's excitement about – I talked about Kamario Taylor from a quarterback standpoint and the excitement there. I think you've got a really explosive receiving core with Anthony Evans coming back, Marquise Johnson stepping in as a transfer from Missouri as a guy that can be a big play receiver down the field. Fluff Bothwell back at running back. I look on the defensive side of the ball, the linebacker room with Tyler Lockhart, Takari Tillman, Jalen Smith, I think is incredibly talented. I already mentioned you got a potential shutdown corner in Kelly Jones, and you brought in a transfer opposite him. And this is looking bad by me being the Mississippi State guy. I know his name's Quentin. I'm blanking on his last name. Is it? Let me find it. He was at Iowa State. It was a good transfer for them. Quentin Taylor. There we go. Who was a good starter for Iowa State last year. And then Isaac Smith in the secondary, plus a couple other veteran safeties stepping in. They got to figure out line of scrimmage. If they figure that part out, and they've added a couple intriguing transfers on the offensive line, defensive line, I really like the addition of D'Alen Evans from Texas A&M as sort of a high talent, high ceiling player in the middle there that could be a bit of a, if nothing else, if he's a space eater in the middle of the defense, that would be a big step forward for them. State does have the pieces where I could see them being a much better team. Now, it's a difficult schedule. I mean, at Minnesota week 2 is not easy. Like going on the road up against a very well-coached PJ Fleck team. I know this, they're going to run the football. Like that's going to be a test for State's defensive front early. You get the battle of brother-in-laws and Jeff Lebby and Kendall Briles in week 2 or week 3 at South Carolina. Alabama coming to Starkville. Then you got a bye week until at LSU. I know Texas and Oklahoma still on the schedule. And obviously closing the year with, I think Auburn is on the schedule this year. Jackson's got control of the thing. So I can't.
Oh, yeah, my bad.
Yeah, Auburn later in the schedule. And then obviously you close out with Ole Miss on the road. It's not an easy slate. Believe me, I totally get that. But I think they could take a step forward. I mean, if we're trying to talk about the Indiana thing, I mean, a big part of the Indiana model for them and Wonder Signetti was Signetti bringing a lot of players with him. And frankly, there's 2 coaches that applies to. It's Arkansas and Auburn with Ryan Silverfield and Alex Golesh. Now, the guys coming over from Memphis, I don't feel as good about. I'm not super high on Auburn with a lot of the guys they brought back, but I will say this. They are importing the USF offense. Byron Brown at quarterback. The guys they have at receiver, Nimrod and Kashawn Singleton, Jeremiah Kroger or Koger. They got one of the running back coming in. Also the transfer from Baylor that's a very talented player. O-line's going to be a big question for them. But I know they're bringing like the center in. They are transporting in an offense that was incredibly effective and we know is very good. Those guys know how to run the system. It's a system we've seen be successful in the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
They've also had some intriguing defensive transfers, at least on the defensive line. If you can get the offense to click in year one with Byron Brown running things, if you're Auburn, maybe you got a chance to do something right away. And that would kind of be similar to the Curt Cignetti model of I'm bringing James Madison with me to Indiana. That's kind of what we're seeing. Like Auburn is South Florida North now. And is that going to be successful in the SEC? I don't know, but I would trust the offense will score points. So maybe you got something there.
True. I mean, we'll definitely wait and see what happens tonight. Well, not tonight, my bad. We'll definitely wait and see what happens throughout 2026. We've got a lot of time this offseason. We'll definitely get it figured out. But I will say, though, we were going to do some recruiting updates tonight, but with the breaking news that just covered, I think we'll cut it down. We'll make sure we let you know about some recruiting updates, ladies and gentlemen, all right here on SEC The Voice College Football. And just before we kind of sign off, Andrew, what magic are you cooking up on Mississippi State The Voice College Football, good buddy?
Well, it's been a lot of portal updates over the last few days. So if you're trying to keep up with what Mississippi State's doing in the portal for whatever reason, if you're a college football sicko or if you're a Bulldog who is discovering the idea of Mississippi State Voice of the College Football through SEC The Voice of College Football, we'll go over, subscribe to Mississippi State The Voice of College Football. We're going to do a lot of portal talk. I think I'm going to go straight into recording on the Jordan Seaton news because, hey, Mississippi State was in pursuit. So what does that mean for the Bulldogs? So going to get some content up on the channel very soon talking about Jordan Seaton. And him landing with the LSU Tigers, what that means for Mississippi State. So, yeah, we're a young channel, still growing channel, but we're trying to get the subscriber number up. So, if you guys are interested in Mississippi State news, follow us out over there. And then also, you can occasionally catch my writing at Maroon and White Nation over with the Fansided Network.
All right, man. Tell your friends, your family, and the cashiers of pubs about the magic that Andrew's cooking up all right here on Mississippi State, The Voice of College Football. And all right here on SEC at The Voice of College Football. And also you can check me out on Alabama, The Voice of College Football, where you're going to see me and Travion Ware cover this breaking news of Kalen DeBoer finally pulling the plug on Chris Kaplowitz and what offensive line coaches we need to go next. How many candidates we need to get? That's why you tune in all right there on Alabama, The Voice of College Football. But no worries. We'll be keeping you updated on Elijah Haven. We'll be talking about him with all of you all right here on AC, The Voice of College Football. We thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you Monday night. I will be starting with Peter Bartell, Pidsky and Petey. He's going to be a fun guest on Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Central, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And you'll definitely see Andrew, Tucker, Josh, and myself back here Wednesday night as well. And with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, click on the notification bell so you never miss no video whatsoever. And we will see y'all soon. And roll. Well, my bad. See y'all next time.
Hail State.